Alan Lewis Raw Conversation, where every voice has a story.
Yeah.
Hi, Heinz. Well, thanks, Heinz. Welcome to episode 18 of the Alan Lewis Raw Conversation. Today, we're going to talk to an expert who's been in this industry, what started in Australia around 1956. This industry makes stars. At times, it breaks stars. And this industry has had so many things shown on it. The moon landing, sadly 9/11, and then even reality TV, and so many stars who have started on programs in Australia and moved to America and became stars in America. He's been executive producer for some of the major shows on TV, and Rob joins me now. Thanks, Rob.
So great to be here. Thank you.
Rob, thanks for joining me. How you going today?
Yeah, look, I'm all right. It's an interesting day. I'm getting ready to do another episode of McKnight Tonight. We stream that 3 nights a week with a Media McKnight on Tuesdays. And it's fun, like no matter what level of broadcast I'm doing or streaming or internet, I love it all.
Yeah. And when we'll get to a few normal things I normally do on the start of the program. When did you first start enjoying radio, TV? When did your interest first pop up?
Geez, I can't remember a time when I didn't. As a kid, I loved Doctor Who. And it's interesting, a lot of people who followed Doctor Who's got into the television industry especially. And I think it was to do with the fact that even though the special effects were terrible, there were books about how they did it. And I remember what we call chroma key now was called colour separation overlay by the BBC. And they'd often use yellow screens, not blue screens, yellow or any colour. And that's why it was called colour separation overlay, because it would take that colour. We often call it blue screen or green screen now, and they're the two prominent colours, but you can use any colour. And it was things like that, seeing the models, that got me interested in how television is put together. And I just really followed that through. I can't imagine anything else I would have ever done.
And TV's brought, as I said at the start, some amazing events, the moon landing, watching Vietnam War, then, sadly, as I said, the 9/11, and just amazing stories, what brings everyone together. Like, everyone can be watching something together around the world, and it's an amazing thing. We can all watch one thing at the same time.
It is interesting when you look at the history of our modern culture, where everything has played out with people glued to the box. And of course, that is changing now. We're watching on our mobile devices, we're watching on our desktops, we're streaming through our televisions. So the power the networks once had to bring us those events has diminished, but we're still relying on those services in some way to get the news that we all talk about. But yeah, the moon landing, going into Vietnam, the course of that war changed because Americans were seeing the horrors of that war. And actually, since then, you'll notice that you don't get as much access for news crews. The military actually limit the amount of footage networks can get because they don't want those scenes in the living rooms where people will turn against wars.
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, just controlling something, as we say, freedom of the press. Rob, what I do, I'll go back to a little bit of the start. What I do is something I created in my podcast. I got 3 questions, and it's the top, the middle, the bottom, and I don't know which one you're going to pick. And I'm going to see if you can pick which one you want, top, middle, bottom. And of course, I can't read it out today, so Heinz is going to read it for me, and just see what your answer is.
Let's go the top.
Okay, let's go, Heinz.
So, hi, Rob. The top question it is. So, we have here, have you ever thought of an invention that you wanted to create? And if you have, what was it? And if you haven't, what is one
I'm
invention?
not actually hearing anything.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Can you hear him?
No, that could be from my end.
I'll give you the question. I'll see if he can come
Hello?
in. The question is, have you ever thought of an invention to make? And if you haven't thought of an invention, what invention would it be?
Do you know, I came up with the idea of a card to use payphones. I remember getting frustrated in the 80s of only, you always needed money. And obviously, this is before mobile phones. And I thought, wouldn't it be good if we could have a card that could go into the payphone that could have the money on it? I wasn't talking about a credit card. I was talking about a specific card for this. Sure enough, a few years later, Telstra actually released phone cards and
Okay.
did that idea. And I thought, okay, I was onto something. But no big inventions as per se that I can think of.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for that. Like I said, I always like flowing in a little bit of an interesting question to start. And today, well, like I said, thanks for joining me. Like I said, I'm only new at this, and I know you're an expert. So at the end get a bit of your opinion and ask you what you think and see where I'm going. So it'd be very helpful because we both interviewed, sadly, Jamie Dunn, who passed away.
Mm.
I interviewed him around February this year, and what a great man. He inspired me just by some words. He gave me some direction, and you've been behind the scenes on some major shows. And, at the end, I'll see what kind of mark you'll give me for being up to 18 and see how I go. Um, where did you actually grow up, mate? Where did you grow up? Were you a Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne boy? Where were you?
No, I grew up in Campbelltown in Sydney. I grew up in Housing Commission in a suburb called Minto. So it was a bit of a rough area. Well, it wasn't at first. When my parents first moved there, it was sort of like very working class families who were just looking for a break. And they created this whole suburb of Housing Commission. And basically, families who just needed a break moved out, far out. It's the southwest of Sydney. It's pretty much the edge of what is defined as Sydney, and we started building a life. Now, during the recession that we had to have, according to Paul Keating, things got tough, and yeah, crime started breaking out, and the neighbourhood did sort of change. And it's interesting. These houses were so thin, but it had 4 stories. 4 stories might sound luxurious, but it was literally a story each floor. So the lounge room was down at the bottom, the kitchen was in the middle. We had a couple of bedrooms on the 3rd floor, and the 4th floor had mum and dad's bedroom and the bathroom. So there wasn't, it was a very thin house, but it was a tall house, and it joined the wall next door. And there were things growing up in that area where you learned a few of the realities of life. We had a guy who lived next door to us that we'd call Mad Max, and he lived up to that. He would beat his daughters, and I was joined against the wall, and I could hear it happening. And I would often be lying in my bunk beds just thinking his fist was going to come through the wall some nights. Yeah, it was scary from that point of view, but it's what I knew. It's what I grew up with. So, and I actually appreciate having that background because I think it gives me an insight into the realities of the audience we're supposedly connecting with. There's a lot of people that work in the media that don't truly understand the audience. They doesn't stop them doing good jobs at times, but I think they live in a bubble. And I remember one time when I was working at promos at Channel 7, they did this big song and dance of we're going to go out to Penrith. It was Penrith. We're going to go out to Penrith and we're going to get a bus and take everyone out there so you can see the real people. And I just thought it was so condescending, but okay. And there was this lady from marketing who just freaked out. She'd never been past Balmain, and she completely had a meltdown and had to abandon it, couldn't do it. And I just thought, this is ridiculous. These are the kind of people that are trying to reflect culture on our screens and connect with audiences, and they haven't got the first clue. And that's when I started really realizing I was a little bit different to the rest of the people that worked in the media. Now I've met people that are like me, grew up in working class and housing commission and things like that. But there's so many people in television and radio who just don't get what the real Australia is.
And I'll go back to your childhood, but you said something interesting there because you were behind the scenes, and if you had someone in front of the camera, as a producer, is it hard to approach them? How do you do that part of your job? Is it just a conversation? What's the best way you have found to talk to them behind the scenes over the years?
Yeah, it's interesting. Of course, there's always a There's always an aura around on-air people because they know that people are recognizing them, and especially when you're in the TV station or the radio station, but ultimately they're just people and you talk to them. I've been in positions where I've had to chastise high-profile people as an executive, and you just do it, and you step up. The worst kind of people are the ones that don't face it and say everyone's beautiful and then bitch behind their backs. I'm not that kind of person. If I've got an issue, I will talk to you about it. But it took me a long time to get there, of course. You see people on screen, and as you're young in the industry, it's a bit like the wow factor. But I wouldn't say it wears off, but I'd say that you get used to it, and you get used to dealing with these people on a human level.
Yeah, and I suppose after a while they know who you are and they grow respect for you and you grow respect in the industry.
Mm.
That comes a little bit easier too because they know, you got a little bit more respect in a new person and gives them more understanding of where you're coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what it all comes down to. It comes down to a mutual understanding that we're all trying to do work, and any presenter who thinks they know everything is doomed to fail because people will stop helping them. If you're ignored as a producer, you just think, well, I'll focus on people who do use my work. So you have to be respectful of the team effort, and especially television is a team effort. Radio's a little bit more individual because it's really driven by the personality of the presenter. You take a Ray Hadley, he's got a support team, but that was Ray Hadley's show. Ben Fordham is Ben Fordham's show. And it's very much like that when it comes to radio because it's so personality driven. TV is personality driven, but it's more of a team effort because it's not just someone getting behind a mic and talking. There's so many visual elements. The production crew is so much bigger, the studio crews, the cameras, there's so many elements that go into making television work. It really is a collaborative effort.
So, going through when you were a kid and coming to high school and that, did you go to university, college? Where did you first go after that? Your
Yeah,
schooling?
well, I was a bit lost, and when I was in high school, weirdly, I ended up being trusted so much the teachers would give me the keys to the school, and I'd be allowed to film videos in the school over weekends with my friends. So we just ran riot, and I even rang up the Department of the New South Wales Department of Education once, posing as a teacher, and got them to send out all this video equipment so we could
Oh,
use it. So I was a little bit naughty, but I was a bit focused in on all that kind of stuff. So I didn't really focus on the studies. And so I ended up failing year 12, really, and I repeated. But that was a good learning lesson as well. And I was always the youngest in my class, and I feel like I've probably had a little bit of an arrested development. I've got ADHD that has been diagnosed now. And so I think repeating was good for me. But then I had people help me apply for university, and I ended up going to the Charles Sturt University to do a BA in television production. It was a 3-year course, but in the second year, we did internships with Prime Television. And at the end of my second year, Prime TV in Wollongong rang me and offered me a job. All I ever wanted to do was get into television. I had no contacts, I had no friends in the industry. And so I was just like, yeah, I'll take this. It caused a huge kerfuffle with Charles Sturt University. But I left there at the end of my second year, never completed the BA, and went and started my television career as a promotions editor, which basically meant I was adding pre-recorded on Prime tags to Channel 7 promos. And then I started learning directing the news and vision switching the news and things like that, and progressed from there, really.
do you think the going straight into that gave you better kind of learning experience than going through uni? Do you think that probably advanced you a lot faster than the people who were still at uni at that time?
It's a hard thing to say because there were great lessons to learn at uni and getting to experiment and play with ideas. But, I also shockingly didn't overly fit in at uni. I remember we were doing this one course where one of the assignments was to lip sync video. And I said, "Oh, I'll do a video clip." And my lecturer said, "No, you won't." I said, "What?" He said, well, you'll never be able to do it and I'll fail you. Because if you want to lip sync audio and video, I meant just something short. If you want to lip sync video, you'll have to have time code generators and feed in the audio. And I went, oh, no. I can just do it with the editor. I can roll it in at the right time. I do it all the time. And he said, I will fail you if it's not perfectly in sync. And I went, okay. And of course, I went and did it and had it in sync. And I thought he would have been happy. He wasn't.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's always one in the class or one person who still has to prove themselves to others. And I think you've done, like you said, moving on to uni, people at uni to whatever you done. I think it's the best experience. I have always said people, well, kids will start with kids all learn a different way. Some kids are really good in the class where they can, learn maths perfect. One doesn't, but you take him into the next class to measure up something he might build, and he'll do it in a second. And I think we've got to look at how we do teach children, because children learn so many different ways, and we think they are failing because they're not just learning from the book, just the normal
Yeah.
way. But if we look at different ways to teach them, okay, you're not learning that way. We're not going to say you're a failure, or we've got to keep teaching you this way. Let's look at a separate way to teach you how you and your brain acts to this.
I
And
completely agree with that. And when I think about all the problems I've had throughout my life, that can be traced back to having ADHD that was undiagnosed, even in my working career, as a person with ADHD, I'm like, I can prove that I can do this, and I'm not doing it to be combative or I'm right. I'm doing it because I know I can do it. Let me show you. And I always get confused when people are like, they don't look at the result. They look at how it reflects on them because they didn't believe it could be done. And I have always been confused by that. And the point I'm trying to make is that now we are so much more aware of how the neurodiversity that is out there in our community, and we're actually starting to take that on board. And I think that's a really, really good thing. And it will help people going forward. And, my life could have been very different if I'd had that help.
yeah, and I think that, well, a lot of people call it a superpower these days. It's not just,
Yeah.
it's not just an
It's a
issue.
superpower, though. It's a superpower if you know how to manage it. Like, I can hyper focus on TV and things that I'm doing, but get completely distracted at other things. But it has also led to a lot of grief for me throughout my life. And when I've stood up to executives and things like that, and it's caused me problems in the workplace because people don't understand why I keep pushing it. Let it go, Rob. But that's not the right thing. I can give you the right thing. I can get you the ratings, but some people will forego ratings and success to as a power play and proving their point, and that was a thing I never really understood.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, people don't understand. And later down the track, in one of my other podcasts, I'm going to bring a member on who actually has this. And I think the other thing you have to learn too is your partner has to be understanding to this too, because it can be very hard for the partner to
Oh
understand it,
yeah.
'cause it's an up and down motion times. And when your partner can actually understand, okay, it's not this, it's not that, this is what it is. It's a great connection for both you. For someone to understand you is a amazing thing, to understand how you're feeling. It's not you're different, but this is just how you're wired and how you are.
It's so true, but I can tell you that I've caused a lot of issues for my wife, Amanda.
Yeah,
While she understands, especially now, she was the
yeah,
one who kept saying to me, I think you should get checked for ADHD. She gets it, but she lives in a neurodiverse house and it does do her head in sometimes. And I feel
yeah.
sorry for her sometimes.
I think, but again, I think it's for both partners to, like I say, the partnership has to be a best friends, and
Yeah.
you have to, she, as you said, amazing partner understands where you're coming from, and then reversing, you have to say, okay, she has to also put up with a lot too, and I have to understand if she's getting frustrated with me, it's not because of she's just this kind of person. It's hard for her to cope with this at times as well.
Mm.
And when you both can understand each other, I think it's a lot easier to get together and understand, the issues of both are going through. That's a good
Couldn't
deal.
agree more with that. And I probably need to pull up my boots a bit more and help pay it back, basically.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's great. So like you said, you went there, and then what was kind of your first major placement after there? Where did you move on after you were at that place?
So yeah, after Prime Wollongong, I ended up moving within Prime to Canberra, and I was the director of their main 6 p.m. bulletin, switching it as well as being an editor there and doing promos and things like that. And that was a great experience. But I was itching to get to Sydney, and I eventually got a job at the Disney Channel in Australia, in North Sydney. And so yeah, I while it wasn't mainstream television, it was obviously a cable channel. It was a great experience. I got to go to Disney World and Disneyland, doing some shoots with the channel, and got backstage access to Disneyland and Disney World. Got to go into Walt Disney's apartment at Disneyland, a place very few people get to go. So I had amazing adventures there. But then I somehow got an in at Channel 7 and started being used as a freelance fill-in for Today Tonight promos. And Disney were great because they let me do that. I think they knew my time was coming to an end. They had changed executives, and it was sort of a job that there was the executive producer who hired me left, and I went for that role, didn't get it, and a new one came in, and she really wanted to change the whole show and everything like that, which was fine. That's her prerogative, but it just wasn't scratching my creative itch. And basically, Disney were great. They didn't want to lose me, but they sort of figured they'd probably lose me faster if they didn't let me go and occasionally fill in for Today Tonight. And then eventually Seven just said, look, we'd like you to do this full time. And I ended up working at Channel 7 in Epping. I got to experience Media City before it closed down, and the rabbit warrens, and you'd walk through the studio corridors and you'd see Wheel of Fortune being shot, or the big wheel just sitting in the props bay, and you'd give it a spin. Everyone who walked past that Wheel of Fortune wheel gave it a spin. But then, of course, you'd see news going on in Studio C. You'd see Home and Away in the other studio. And basically, it was this amazing place where so much was happening all the time. And that was the point where I went, I've made it. I could have been happy just living that life for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I had a passion of interviewing radio right back to 1985, to the days of Stan Zemanek,
Yeah.
Chuck Brooks, and all these people in Brisbane who, were going back a long way, and it's taken a long time to get here because, now we have this availability of podcasting and YouTube, so I'm very lucky there. But to get there and walk around, and like Home and Away's been going for 85 or something, or 88.
Yeah.
It must have been amazing walking around as a young person, seeing that, and then in the studio seeing all these things actually live and able to touch them. It must have been just incredible feeling just to reach one part of something you probably just was wishing for when it came.
Well, it was amazing. And I remember, look, obviously you couldn't really just walk into studios, but
Yeah.
I do remember being with someone, and for some reason we went into the All Saints studio and no one was there. So we actually got to walk around the All Saints set and see the fake elevators and all that kind of stuff. So that was pretty cool, being careful not to touch anything. But it certainly was a great experience just seeing that world. And you'd be in the canteen and everyone would pass, those old jokes about the Channel 7 canteen and everything like that. And yeah, it was fun just to have that experience where so much production was going on. World has changed since then. At Everleigh, where Channel 7 is now in Sydney, you've got Home and Away. Yes, they do the chase and things like that, but the number of shows has obviously just dropped big time from the big heyday.
Yeah, with streaming and that, do you think less kind of, I suppose we don't have the days of 3 or 4, TV series on TV anymore?
No.
Do you think it's going to, shows it's just going to get less and less where even Australia, most of the shows are just going to be streamlined as well?
Yeah, look, I think we are in big trouble when it comes to the Australian TV landscape. If you look at the trend, the number of shows is going down and the revenues are declining. Channel 10 has lost almost $800 million in the last 3 years. And that's not sustainable, obviously. Now, luckily for them, they're part of a big company with Paramount Global. But how long will the company support that is a big question. There's been cuts going on everywhere throughout Paramount. And so will this lead to Channel 10 just shutting down, being sold off to someone? I really don't know the answer to that. But if you look at 9 and 7 even, outside of the 7:30 reality show, they're not doing much. You know, there's the NRL or AFL sporting panel shows, but otherwise it's news. From 5 a.m., you've got the early news, then you've got Today and Sunrise, and then you've got the morning show and Today Extra, which are news-based. Then you've got on 9, the morning news at 11:30, and on 7, the national news at 12. And then at 4 p.m., we've got news again. And then at 6 p.m., we've got news. And so I think the most likely scenario is that these channels will become 24-hour news channels. Now, how that sustains, I don't know. The reality shows are getting so expensive to make that some just are beyond the expense. They're not covering the cost to make those productions. And Australian production companies once could have a bidding war for a format. Not anymore. Networks are not afraid to pull out and say, well, we won't get the ratings to justify that kind of expense. And so production budgets are coming down. Production budgets used to have a budget of about 20 million for a 6-week series. Now that's down to 15, 12 million. And so that's a big drop. And networks are really pushing these companies to bring in those costs. The large ass is gone. And so we're going to see it continue to diminish. And what you'll find is that these networks will run more specials, buy-ins, things like that, and just have to forego the ratings. And that's why sport is so important, because sport goes for a long period of the ratings year. And that's why the NRL and AFL is so important to 9 and 7. And if they lost one of those, if 10 picked up the NRL, well, that's a game changer because there's an audience there that will watch them. Would it be enough? How far can they go? That's another question. But those can be a loss leader, but really in this day and age, I don't really think they can afford to keep having loss leaders like the Olympics and big sporting events. So I'm really worried about the Australian television industry because I'm not seeing any innovation. I'm not seeing any innovation and new ideas. It's existing formats. It's a rehash of old brands, and they're just not pushing forward with anything new, which I think is really disappointing.
And excuse me, I think you know, the NRL and AFL have been even talking to Netflix and even like that to take it to there anyhow as well. So you know that'd be a big loss to TV. And I think the Emmy Awards.
There's a big thing. Sorry to interrupt,
No,
but
it's
there's
all right,
a
go.
big issue there that Netflix and the streamers don't seem that interested. Now, I don't know whether that's because they don't think NRL and AFL will go big globally, or because they're worried about they've got to be careful because politically, NRL and AFL not being on free-to-air television would be a major issue. And so there could be law changes. And I think the big streamers are just sitting back for the moment to see where things land with upcoming legislation and things like that. And so that's why there's not that rush for them to jump in and take those rights, which is a problem for Peter V'landys, the chairman of the NRL, because he wants a bidding war. He wants record rights. But with the gambling laws that Anthony Albanese just announced when it comes to advertising, all of a sudden you've cut a major swathe of revenue from sporting events like the NRL and AFL because they're limited to 3 spots per hour. There's a lot more than 3 spots per hour going out on those sporting broadcasts. And so that's going to affect the revenue. And if the networks, there's no one jumping in there. It's not like the 80s when tobacco was banned from advertising. You know, you really only had TV, radio, newspapers, and magazines. There were 4 places, and billboards, but really 4 places to promote your product. Not anymore. There's a million places to promote your product. There's podcasts, there's websites, there's all these other places. And so no one is going to jump in to fill the gap left by the gambling advertisers. And that is another worry for the broadcasters.
Yeah, and I think it's the Emmys or the logos next year might in logos or whatever in the
The
United States
Logies.
America are moving to YouTube next year.
Yeah, there was a April Fool's joke here in Australia. The Logies are still going on free-to-air TV on Channel 7. But
Yeah, but
yes, the
America,
Oscars from
Oscars, sorry.
2028.
Yes,
So,
you there?
oh, sorry. I thought you were talking.
No, sorry. No, I butted in because I said, yeah, that's right. I just didn't get the right name right. Sorry.
Cool. Yeah, the Oscars will, and then you have the Oscars from 2028. They will be exclusively on YouTube. So they've got another couple of years to run on ABC America, but then they're a YouTube event. So you've also got YouTube trying to get some of these rights. And so the world is shifting and television is becoming less relevant. But I don't think that equates to radio, because radio, and especially personality-driven radio like Carl and Jackie O, is connecting with audiences. Ben Fordham, Russ and Ross in Melbourne. These talkback stations, I think, are the future of radio, and I think FM will need to pivot towards a little bit more of that longer form talk breaks rather than playing music, because we can get music anywhere now.
Yeah. Yep. And I heard you were talking about that on one of your videos or podcasts, and it's interesting. Like you said, they're looking at even KISS going to like a talkback program and things like that. I don't know if this is a weird thing. Like what you do pay for streaming networks. People like Kyle and Jackie O going through court at the moment, but shows like that who can be quite censored with the laws and that in communications in Australia.
Mm.
Do you think there could be like satellite radio where you might pay a certain amount? I suppose it's like I suppose you can say that's Spotify, but where you can just go and listen to that. So a radio station will be completely live on Spotify, so it won't come under the same laws.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if Kyle can't get back on the radio, I think he will launch or would launch his own streaming service and charge people $12 or something a month for that. And I think people would go to it. I think he could easily cover his costs with doing something like that. And that's an interesting future. People are getting very siloed and they're going to the places they want. And if radio stations, the whole ARN thing with Kyle and Jackie O, I don't believe those listeners are going to go to other radio stations. I believe a large majority of them will just leave radio altogether. They were staying because of their love of Kyle and Jackie O, because of their love of those personalities. And I don't hear anything on Sydney radio that would, I believe, entice those fans of Kyle and Jackie O to go and try those other shows.
Not at all. And I think he showed that when he moved from one radio station to the other.
Today FM to ARN, absolutely.
He made sense. Someone who loves Home and Away, if it moves to Channel 10, they're not going to watch it because, I can't go and turn on Channel 10. I'm going to watch Home and Away. If you're loved, you will move to Channel 10, whatever happens. So
absolutely. And there is the arrogance of executives. Carl famously tells the story of how he was told by Today FM management, "Oh, you got 2 years left and then you're done." And Carl went, "Stuff that. I'll go and create this whole new brand," which he did. He went to ARN, he did a deal, he created the KISS brand. And how long's he been there? 20 years or something like that?
I don't know. I think it was 2015 or something for there. So 10 years, I think.
Oh, is it only that long? Jeez, my timing's all out. But so from when he joined KISS, it's been very popular. He's only gone out now. This is a commercial decision because the deal that ARN made with Kyle and Jackie O 6 months later doesn't make sense because things have changed. Or a year later, it doesn't make financial sense, which is why ARN want out of it.
Yeah. And I think, my opinion, and like I said, you've all been in it longer than I have. The silly thing is, I understand people say 100 million here, that's silly, they're not worth it. But I think the silly thing, if anyone was offered 100 million, if your house is worth $1 million, someone offers it 20 million, you would take it. I mean, we're all out there to invest and go. it's not bad, or no one should be paid that much. But I reckon these people who say, oh, you shouldn't pay that person that much, if they got told, well, I'll give you $10 million and never say it again, they'll never say it again. It's just quite silly. You're looking after your investment and your life.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. It could have easily been Southern Cross Austereo that were having to deal with Carl and Jackie O. They were wanting them back big time. They were offering big money, which is why ARN had to counter. It was all, you're only as valuable as the market, right? And the market at that point said Carl and Jackie O were worth $10 million a year. Yeah, each. It's extraordinary. And in hindsight, it's not a good deal for ARN. But that's the deal they put on the table because Southern Cross Austereo was trying to get them.
Yeah, and exactly. And no one's going to say no to that much money. Go, oh,
No.
That's, like I said, people say you shouldn't pay that person that much or they're not worth it. Well, if they got off.
Well, the market decides that. The market decides if you're worth it or not.
Exactly. And I did hear the phone call you made with Kyle and Bruno that night, and that was a great phone call. And just hearing Kyle's set on his beliefs and he hasn't changed, and I think that shows a lot of strength. Of whatever you think of him, they say it's controversial or whatever, but he's got his beliefs, and he hasn't stepped down from what he believes in and what he says.
Absolutely. And that's what this whole court case is about. And I really don't see how ARN can win that one. They fired him for the events of February 20. They specifically said that in their ASX market statement. And so, but now it seems that they're trying to change the narrative and talk about his behavior before that. That's very complicated when you're changing the reason that you fired someone. Everyone I've spoken to legal experts who say Kyle has a big case, a good case. So it's going to be interesting. And I have to apologize if you're hearing my dog in the background. My daughter took the dog out for a walk and decided I'll just put her in the studio with Dad while he's doing an interview. So my apologies.
It's all right. Well, my seeing eye dog's actually in another room, so it's all good if you bark. That is fine. So it's part of the interview anyhow, so that's great. No, don't worry. That's
okay, cool.
That's the great thing of having live studios these days.
Well, I do everything from my garage, and that's the amazing thing. People don't realize it's from my garage. I've got the monitor, I've got the set, and so and that's the thing. I think people are looking for a bit more professionalism than perhaps what they had before. I've gone against everyone said, oh no, you just film it with your iPhone. That's what people want. I went, no, you know what? I'm going to do a show. And people are coming. I don't have the profile of a Carl Stefanovic. I don't have the marketing budget of a Channel 9, but I'm slowly growing and I'm getting there. And viewers are coming. They're liking what they see. They're subscribing. And so, I think I'm on the right path because I do think what we're seeing on YouTube is evolving, and video podcasts are a huge thing now.
Yeah, and I was listening to you saying that. I think you have created a program or something to help people set that up. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I'm still in the early stages of it, but I've created a company called Video Podcast Services .online, and the whole idea behind this is that you've got to move to video. Audio has been great, but video podcasting is really becoming a huge thing on YouTube. They've got like 1 billion streams a month now. It's crazy, crazy numbers when it comes to video podcasts. So if you want to be in the podcasting space, you've got to look at video podcasting. And I realized I've got all the technology. I've been working on this, playing with it for years and years. And so I've decided to try and make it easy for anyone that wants to make the leap. So right now I can put up boxes. If your host can be anywhere in the world. You can have a host here on the Gold Coast, one in the US, and I can put the boxes up. I can switch. When you use automated programming, you either have the boxes up the whole time or it goes depending on your voice. Well, with me switching it, you get that just a little step up and the proper supers and everything like that, and you can live stream. So I'm trying to make it easier for people to up their video podcasting game, basically.
No, it's something I'm really interested in actually talking to you behind scenes. As I said, I got behind that moment who helped me, but not being able to see it. not the greatest thing with cameras and understanding that. And just recently I brought this camera and understand that's the next step up. And when I did do it, one of my sons, he's 27, said, "Oh, that's the changing game. That's
Exactly.
so much better already." He said, "It's amazing." And I suppose you look at studios do it already, live studio, why they're in there these days. So they're moved to that platform anyhow, same as people on YouTube and Spotify are anyhow.
One of the crazy things, though, is they're still very audio focused, and they're not. A lot of them aren't live streaming. Kyle and Jackie O didn't live stream their show, and that's probably because they had the issue where they had the censors doing audio, so the video probably would have been a little bit harder to do the censorship for. I don't know, but they'd clip up things. But yeah, I think any show should be embracing video as we move forward. And the best thing is, if you've got a show that you can listen to in the car, great. If you're at home, you can put it on one of your screens. You can put it on your TV screen, and that, you can still generate revenue from that. I think radio is still very far behind. They're making big leaps, but I still think they've got a way to go.
Yeah, and sorry, like you said, so many radio stations aren't doing it. And I think with Kyle and Jackie O, like just the censors and things like that, it's amazing. Some of the stuff probably shouldn't be said on air, but then you can switch to a podcast and hear every word in the world, and they're censoring, saying children can't hear this, but it's not like there's any block. Your parents can watch what kids are listening to, but you can go to any podcast or type in anything like a website, X-rated, hear anything, and hear every word in the world. But we beep out certain things on radio. What's quite stupid.
Well, the difference is that radio comes through the airwaves as a free service. When you go to a podcast, you have to subscribe. You can't just accidentally come across it tuning in, and there are warnings about expletive language and all that kind of stuff. So I do get some of the restrictions we have when it comes to what is broadcast freely. So, but it is interesting, as you say, podcasts don't fall under any kind of code. You can say anything. It can get crazy.
Yeah, and then you look at YouTube. Have to be careful these days, but you can look at YouTube now, who are controlling even just as much of what you can say or who you can talk about a little bit, or the restrictions on that. And I think they're taking away a little bit of free speech as well.
Well, the thing with YouTube is that it more comes down to the monetization. So I haven't had any content blocked, but they might say this is sensitive, you can't monetize it. So you just make that decision: will I trim it out or will I keep it in? Copyright claims are a pain in the bum with YouTube, but I fight all of them because of what I do. I talk about news, politics, I give commentary, and any clips I show are in response to being able to go through what was said in that clip. I win all my copyright disputes with YouTube. I think it's actually a fair system on the whole. And but as far as content goes, I haven't noticed any censorship, but there very well might be. Maybe I just don't cover those issues.
Yeah. What with getting monetized, I mean, YouTube seems a little bit easier than like Spotify and that when I look in that.
Absolutely.
I really want to do that's, I've got a love for what I'm doing at the moment and really want to. Then I look at it, and the difference between trying to monetize on Spotify to YouTube, really hard. How have you gone that way with YouTube, trying to get yourself monetized? And well, you are, but what's the best way for someone new to try to build that up?
It's all about YouTube. I've got more followers and I've got more views on TikTok, but it makes me no money whatsoever. Whereas YouTube, I've got an engaged audience and it's growing, but I'm monetizing on that. Now, look, it's not a living wage or anything like that, but it's growing all the time. And so I just think YouTube actually makes it easier to monetize than any other platform. TikTok doesn't have a good way of monetizing unless you're selling merch and stuff like that. YouTube says, we're serving up ads in your content. We'll take our cut and we'll give you some of the cut as well, because basically we don't have content without the creators. And so I think that YouTube actually has the best model when it comes to monetization. And all my efforts, I used to I still stream on Facebook and other platforms, but I always say, if you want to help the show, watch us on YouTube, subscribe on YouTube, because that's how we make the money.
And it's amazing you said that. Like I said, I'm only up to my 18th show, but the other day it just clicked in my head. I was looking at, to get monetized on Spotify to YouTube's like 1,000 subscribers and 2,000 hours or something. I went, what I've been, when you get into it at the start, you're thinking this because you're not doing as much research, and you look at it and go, why have I been focusing so much just thinking Spotify? Then you look at YouTube, and the difference is amazing to what you can work on and trying to build that platform up.
Absolutely. And look, it takes longer with YouTube because you've got to penetrate the algorithm. Don't buy followers or streams because they're not lasting. TikTok gives you a sugar hit. You can get thousands and thousands of views, but it does nothing for you. And people and people I spoke to at YouTube all said, you've just got to be consistent and you've got to be patient. And they're right. I've seen growth. I've seen more money coming in the door. Again, it's not a living wage, but I've seen growth. I've seen that it can work, and you're just not going to get those sugar hits, but it will come over time. Of course, you've got to have content that people want to watch and listen to, but if you've got that, then it will ultimately come.
Exactly. And what people don't understand, and what I have talked to family members about, is, the one person suddenly becoming famous for one thing, it's that one person. But this is what I think people don't understand. If you're going to do this, it's a full-time business. It's a full-time, you got to put everything into it. You're doing it yourself. You're producing it, you're editing, you're trying to get people to come in, plus trying to, like you said, have another job on the side, what's bringing the salary in. So, it takes a long time. Then that's why so many people fail. You see, they'll put up one or two podcasts or one or two Spotify's, and suddenly they're missing, where they it's so easy to think you're going to become famous, but it's a full-time job. And that's one thing I have found out. It's amazing how much time has to go into this job.
It's so true. And I spend a lot of time on this, more time than my wife would like, but I go the extra mile. I do the graphics. I just try to make it look like a well-produced, polished show. And, the results are slowly coming.
No, I congratulate you for that. Just going back to, I know you were at Studio 10. Tell me your time with Studio 10 and how that was with working with the people on the panel and the interviews, what came through. How was that time in your...
Oh, look, I loved making Studio 10. That's no secret. It's so funny. When you start out and you're struggling to survive, it's a real family. But when we started getting some success, that's when division started. And to be honest, by the end of Studio 10, I was physically exhausted. I was waking up in the middle of the night with ideas and things like that, and every day was a struggle. And Channel 10 never made me feel safe, and which they ended up sacking me, so I had right not to feel safe. But they always made me feel like the show could be axed at any moment, even though we were making money. I remember a conversation I had with the finance person, and I said, well, we're all right because we're making money. And they said, well, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. We just might think that budget's well suited to something else. And I couldn't understand it. I'm like, you've got a show that actually brings you revenue. It's climbing in the ratings. Its trajectory is to get to number one. And again, the ADHD side of me, which was undiagnosed at that time, was like, I don't understand this. I don't understand that. And when I look back, the way I was treated was really bullying by the network. I don't know what the game was. The management who hired me had gone and were replaced by other people, but it was about control. And, they didn't like the show. They didn't, when they eventually got rid of me, they changed the show into a clone of the morning show and Today Extra, and it bombed. Its ratings went down so quickly. We had something special, and I loved it. If I'd had my time again, I would have paced myself. I would have, I would have been a different manager knowing what I know now. And so I'm sure I infuriated people. I got too caught up in it. But having the chance to do that show is probably one of the highlights of my life. I really did love it, and I really felt people still talk about that show. They had such a connection with it. I do think we created something special.
And excuse me, I think you did. And like you said, you learned some stuff from that, what you may have should have done, and you wish
Yeah.
you did do. What will make you better now in your building your own series and what you're doing now, your own program. So, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think what's happened is now you come into what you're doing now, and it's taught you even more how to look out what you're doing and how to treat yourself. And I think that's going to help even build what you're trying to do now with YouTube and your podcast and things like that. But I think with as I said, I'm not expert in it, but I think with the people like you said who are putting pressure on you when they didn't like it and do like it, they're like the people who, when it's going real good and they want to talk about it, they'll stand beside you and get the glory. But if the ratings drop down, they'll find that office and say it's that person's problem, and stay in the office till the ratings go back up.
Well, I think that was one of the problems. Studio 10 was so associated with me, no one else could claim the credit. You had the presenters and me, and we were really seen as the drivers of the show. There were a lot of talented people on the show, don't get me wrong, but everyone always said it was a reflection of my personality, and I would change the show on the run. So executives at 10 weren't able to claim credit, which is why they didn't want the show to be successful. I'm convinced of that.
Yeah. And the what's sorry, when you left there, did you have to have a bit of a big break with the mental stress and that what came from that? Did you kind of just close down for a while? What did you do to yourself when you left there?
Well, I rushed into another job as I was doing maternity leave cover at News Corp,
Yeah.
and I hadn't really processed what had happened. And it's funny, someone once said to me during that time, "You have PTSD," because um, I couldn't understand why 10 were being so mean. It's one thing not to want me, but not to pay out the 13 weeks of my contract that was still owed. I just thought there was a level of meanness about it that I couldn't understand. And so I did struggle. And eventually I just had to get out of Sydney and we moved up to the Gold Coast. And I don't know whether that was a good or bad move for the family. The kids like it. But, we left everything we knew in Sydney. And that was a result of just having to mentally try and deal with everything. And we lived off savings and things like that for a long time while I essentially tried to get over it. I'm over it now. I'm still sad about how Studio 10 ended, but I've moved on. I've got no. People say, "Oh, he's just bitter." I probably was for a while because I just thought it was unfair. I'm not anymore. Shit happens. So we move on.
Well, I don't think it's bitter. I think if you feel honestly you've been, triggered and treated wrong, why wouldn't you have some bitter to yourself? It's like, if someone's kicking you in the head, you're not gonna
Yeah,
like
true.
it. I think you got a fair to have that feeling as long as you want. People say get over it, but as the old saying is, do you walk into my boots and know how I was treated, how much I loved that show and what happened to me, you got no understanding how I feel. And we always tell people how they should feel or get over it. But it's a lot easier, I think, just to telling people what I always do is listen, you want to feel that way, that's okay. I don't understand. You feel that way and you have a right. I'm not going to change you how you feel if you're feeling sad or anything. I'm here for you. But, you take your time to get over what has happened to you.
Yeah, I think there's validity in that, and it's certainly been a journey. I'll say that.
No. Well, I see, like I said, I recently, like I said, found out, had heard of your name and that through Studio 10 and that before. And then when, sadly, when Jamie Dunn passed away, I heard that you interviewed him, I think just before me. When you started setting this all up in your garage, as you said, I suppose that was the conversation with your wife, what you wanted to do. How did that conversation start and that thought of getting to where you are now?
Yeah, it was an evolution. And look, I said that I thought my interview with Jamie was probably his last because I wasn't aware of your interview.
No.
So apologies for that.
No, I don't mean that way. Not at all.
No, I just, I just pretty upfront with all that stuff. But this has been an evolution. We decided to try and do an internet show with the Ben, Rob and Robbo show, and we did a lot of crazy things with that show. And we slowly started building up our equipment, and then I started doing other jobs with the equipment, and so it ultimately built, and we couldn't sustain what we were doing with the Ben, Rob and Robbo show, which became the Rob and Robbo show, because it just wasn't sustainable. And I have to be careful about what I'm doing here with the balance of McKnight Tonight. And I've got a producer who helps me book guests. I just try and do a couple of three topics a night and an interview. That is sort of sustainable. I'm doing other things around it, but I did build a set, and and I was working at 7 Spotlight for a while, and then 7news.com.au, and so. But now it's a bit of a focus. I do some odd jobs, but it's really we would like to try and make this work, and the podcast online podcast services. We'd like to try and make that work too. And so we're just trying to see what we can do and get other people to join us on this journey, because I do think this is the future. What we do in our garage, I think, and people say it looks like a TV show. So we make it look good, but we can do so much more. But we just have to find that balance in bringing in an income, believing in ourselves, and seeing how far we can push things.
I think it's going to work. Excuse me. I think it's going to work because I think you got the personality, you got the experience, and as I said, I think you got that ability to keep growing it, because you know how things have to grow with your experience through Studio 10 and that. And I think it does come down to the love of what you do. You know, like you said, the love of what you do has came from a child of watching Doctor Who, to going to university to do what you do, and you're in something what you love. Where some people can be in a job, they like it, they thought they're going to like it, but they just go from A to B every day. But if you got this passion for it, as you said, my wife sometimes thinks I'm doing research or doing probably too much what I'm doing here sometimes is, but I think that's just a protection of them too, loving it too. But I think that passion you got is only going to help you grow this, and I can't wait to see how far it grows for you. And
thank you.
No, I really do, and that's why I'm only very my background comes back from personal training and life coaching and that. But it's something I have always wanted to go into, and when I was listening to what you have created, that's why I wanted to get on to you, because it's just great to talk to someone who has the honest opinion about what's going on out there. And I see on your shows you don't, I won't say, you don't care what you say. If you feel like you've got to say it, you will, and you say the truth. And I think that is very humbling too, because people are so careful on networks of what they can say and how they can say it. And when you have that freedom, it's amazing I suppose, anxiety, what it can take away from worrying what could happen to you in the background.
Yeah, one of my problems is that I am too honest, and that gets me into a lot of trouble.
Yeah. But hey, if you're going to be honest, you can look at yourself in the mirror every morning when you wake up, don't you?
I agree with that.
And what talking about your lovely wife, what area did she work in? Did she work in television, anything like that as well?
Yeah, I met her at Prime Canberra. We met there and fell in love, and she came up when I got the job at Disney in Sydney, came up with me, took a chance. We hadn't been together a long time before she came up with me, but we just rolled the dice and went, well, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But she's been great, very supportive. Sits here, switches the show each night, puts the stream to air. So I couldn't have done it without her. And I'm very lucky to have her there helping me and supporting me.
And for the future, like you said, you just want to keep growing the show. What kind of ideas of growing the show have you got to how to spread it and grow it? What's your
Well, often it's all about making noise, and we're going to do a 24-hour live stream. I was going to do that for the 100th episode last week,
Yep.
but we've been talking to Guinness World Records, and they're interested in us doing it as an official record. So that just takes a bit of time to get all the paperwork in order. But yeah, so in a few weeks, I may actually be doing a solo 24-hour live stream. So that will hopefully get people to sample the show.
Tell me how you're going to put that together.
Well, basically, I'll do the first hour like a normal episode, and then my wife will go to bed, and I'll sit here with the switcher myself, and I'll switch it, and I'll look at websites, what's coming through, and give my opinions. I'll tee up a few interviews, and see how I can sustain 24 hours.
Well, I'll put myself out there. If you want someone to call in or me to give a bit of a call to me, have a bit of a talk, I'll be there because I'm trying to grow myself too. So if you,
aren't we all? We all?
As Jamie Dunn said to me, say yes to everything, and I'll put that out there. So if you want someone to join you for a little while that night, let me know and I'll be there.
Absolutely, sounds like a plan.
Okay, so. Hopefully you have enjoyed it. Like I said, my interview style is like I said to you when I sent you that message. I just like sitting down, not having general questions where, like you said, I think we have to be ourselves when we do this. And when I decided, I thought I'm not going to try to copy anyone. I just want to go in and be myself. And I thought I just want to set this up, sit down, have a talk to someone. And I think sometimes the interview style can be just as good because you can flow down areas that someone hasn't talked about before, and they can feel, really comfy. Then, feeling like, questions are going to be asked what have been asked before, or, trying to challenge them for that one clickbait to become famous. So again, I hope you enjoyed it and I'm being okay.
I certainly did. I love just a conversation. It's how I do a lot of my interviews as well. I just have a chat with someone, and as long as you're listening and can do follow-ups, which you've done, it's a great chat. I've really enjoyed myself. Thank you so much.
No, that's fine. Coming to a bit to the end, some of the questions I do asked in the end. Who, with my a friend or someone this is the first one, a friend or someone like you said, you're always got to try to get yourself more known or building up and get introduced. Someone you may know who you think would be a friend or something would be very suitable for this podcast. Who would you say, hey, I'm going to contact this person or tell them about me and would be great for this kind of interview?
I think Joe Hildebrand is the name that springs to mind, funnily enough. He's always up for a chat, probably more than too much of a chat, but
no, okay, there we go. I might click you into that one day or try to push into that. And someone, if you thought, hey, I'm going to sit back and listen to Alan tonight, he's got someone I have always would love to listen to in an interview, famous actor, sports person, movie star. Who would you love to? You always love seeing them in an interview.
That's a really tough one. Because you know what? It's not always about the name. Sometimes you can get the most fascinating interviews from someone who's not well known, but just is open to the process and opens themselves. So I'd be more likely to listen based on the recommendation that this is just a really good interview rather than a certain name.
Okay, no, thanks. And like I said, to give me some pointers, you've been a producer and all the network and been doing this for a long time. Any hints for me and how you think I have done today? I don't care if it's criticization, I don't, or anything. What kind of hints or what did you think of the interview and how it's been set up today?
I think it's been great. Although I didn't answer the Google doc you went that you had with asking me all these questions. I went, You've got me on because you like me. So I'm going to let you just ask questions rather than give you a brief. And I think that has worked so well. I actually think you do a great job. Naturalness will just come with time. And so it just comes with the more you do it, the more it's just time behind the microphone. And so you will find there will be a big difference from episode 1 to episode 18 and episode 18 to episode 100. And you will find your own rhythms. Don't be afraid of being yourself. You know, let your cheekiness come out, or let your side come out. People will connect with you. Not, you know, it's like news. The thing I hate about some news reporters and some presenters is they'll speak to you like this and they'll have a conversation, but as soon as they get behind a microphone, they'll go, "Tonight in the news, we're going to cover the," and it's like, it's not real. It's not real. Now, I don't have the deepest, best voice for radio or anything like that, but I feel like people connect with me because I speak from the heart. And yes, I project and I do all those kind of things. You know, I do have a different presenting voice than if I'm just having a casual chat, because I'm thinking about my words. I'm thinking about how I can keep things shorter and more concise. And so it will never be the same as if I'm just talking to my wife in the kitchen. But the more personality you can bring to your presenting, I personally believe, the better.
No, I totally agree. And again, thanks for that. And what I've learned from, you know, like you said, number 1 to 18, it's amazing. You have to adapt to each person. Like today's interview, I really enjoy. And when I first started it, like I said, I didn't want to copy anyone. And you think you start with telling, you know, where did you grow up and that. But it's amazing. You know, I did talk to some people like that, but I talked to a sheriff in America, and I could tell he wasn't the kind of person who wanted to tell you about his childhood, but he told
So you
really
pivot
good.
and move on. And Andrew
Exactly.
Denton made a huge mistake when he interviewed Jeff Kennett.
Yeah.
Kennett was there to promote on his Enough Rope program, Beyond Blue.
Yep.
And Denton always planned out his interviews.
Yeah.
And Denton had Beyond Blue near the end. But Jeff Kennett's there getting annoyed during the interview because he's not being asked about the thing he came on to talk about. And so Denton has said, in hindsight, what he would have done was ask about the Beyond Blue stuff so that he could get to the stuff that Denton was interested in, because it's a give and take, right? Someone's there to promote something, you do the promotion, but you also want to get something out of them, especially in that kind of format. But what Denton's mistake was not realizing that during the interview and just throwing out the way he had ordered it and gone into the Beyond Blue stuff and then pivoted back to the questions he wanted to ask.
So correct. And I finished, excuse me, I finished off. That's kind of what I thought about our interview today. I know for how long you've been in this industry, your passion is about talking about TV and what's happening. And I thought the way to get someone to speak is find what their passion is. You know,
Yeah.
don't go down any other you know, rabbit hole. Talk about their passion, and then the interview and the talk will go like you're just sitting there and, you know, interested in each other and talking. And I think that's how the interview went today. And I really enjoyed everything you said. And again, taking your time to come on, I thank you for, you know, accepting. You accepted straight away. And I have, what I'm doing is I'm making sure I ask everyone. Every kickback doesn't worry me. The next person to say yes. And that's, you know, that's how I've chose to do this. And you said yes straight away, and I respect that. And I hope your channel grows, and, you know, we can talk again. And, you know, when you do that 24 hours thing, like I said, my offer's there. But, you know, thank you so much for coming on today. And thank you for your advice at the end as well.
Absolute pleasure. Anytime. Thanks for having me, Alan.
Thanks, Rob.